This week's halacha shir is entitled Yeshiva Bochrim in the Israeli army. It's a very interesting topic, and I'm very aware that it's a very emotive topic with lots of different views. And I don't wish to be controversial or to wade into areas which are sensitive, but like we do every week, to discuss an interesting topic, maybe from a halachic angle, which relates to this week's Sedra. And that is, again, the overriding objective. This week's Sedra is Pashas Lech Lecha, and we have the famous battle of the 4 kings against the 5 kings. If you look at the first box, if you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. .co.uk. The pasuk says, "Vayhi b'mei Amrofel melech Shinar Aryoich melech Elosam Ketar Omer melech Elam Mesidl melech Goyim etc. Osu Melchama." They did the war. So the famous war says an opportunity to discuss these things. Now, a few hakdamas. Hakdama number 1, there are different types of war which are recognized in halacha. The first is a melchemes mitzvah, and that is a war to conquer Eretz Yisrael. The classic precedent is, of course, Yeshua, when he entered Eretz Yisrael, or indeed a war against Amalek, that is entitled a melchemes mitzvah. And then the second type is the contrast, and that is a melchemes reshus. That is a war largely fought to expand the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael, and the classic precedent for that are the wars fought by David HaMelech. Now, that's Hakdama number 1, melchemes mitzvah, melchemes reshus. The second introduction is behavior in war and the moral imperative. The pasuk says in Kiseitze la milchama aloivecha v'nishmarto mikol dovara. You should take care against all things bad. Yiddishkeit does not sanction immorality in war. It's not a green light for any untoward behavior, which is often found in battles today, in terms of unnecessary murder, various assaults, rape, looting, etc. And of course, a high moral code is expected, and there are plenty of sources to that. The Chofetz Chaim wrote a famous sefer, Machan Yisrael, and there in the second and third parak, he discusses that a Jewish soldier, must observe whatever mitzvahs he can, even in a non-Jewish army. The Chofetz Chaim wrote, in fact, all his farim for the needs of the day. And the Machaneh Yisrael was exactly that, for Jewish soldiers who were conscripted to non-Jewish armies, the Russian army, the Polish army. And he makes that point in the opening Parokim, in Parokim 2 and 3. Another point is that a fallen soldier should be buried individually and not in a mass grave. That's based on Yerushalmi and Eruvin. And also in Machaneh Yisrael, in Parokim Yud Beis and Yud Daled, he makes the point, the Chofetz Chaim makes the point, that a soldier must learn Torah whenever feasible. Now the big question is, in terms of nowadays, should Yeshiva Bochrim serve in the army, not serve in the army? As I said, a very emotive and heated topic. And I just want to present just a few different ideas on both sides of the equation. In terms of Yeshiva Bochrim should serving in the army, well, the pasuk says in Bamidbar Perek Lamed Beis, this is in paragraph 4 on the handout, that was a taina against the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, Chatzi Sheva Menashe, when they were, this told Moshe Rabbeinu they were going to stay outside of Eretz Yisrael, on the east side of the Yarden, and not go into Eretz Yisrael. The response was, how can that be? Your brother's going to war, and you're going to stay here and watch your brother's battle. That's not right. So there is that taina. It's a taina which is a precedent in Torah itself. The Rambam furthermore says, this is in Melachim Perek Hey Halacha Aleph, the last box on the first side, Ein hamelech nilchem techila el melchemes mitzvah. The Ezri Melchemes Mitzvah, what is the definition of a Melchemes Mitzvah? Zu Melchemes Shivas Hamamim, so like I described in the beginning, it's the battle to get rid of, when Yeshua came in, and to eradicate the 7 nations that were occupying Eretz Yisrael at the time, Melchemes Amalek, and the battle against Amalek, to eradicate Amalek, Ve'ezras Yisrael miyad tsar shebo aleihim, and helping Klal Yisrael against any enemy that is tormenting them. And then you have the Melchemes HaReshus, battle to engage with other nations, to expand the boundaries, the borders of Israel, and to spread and to increase the greatness and the reputation of the Jewish people. Now, then the Rambam says, so you've got those 2 types of milchama. The question is, of course, what does other more contemporary battles fall into. Is it Melchemes Mitzvahs, is it Melchemes Rishus? That's one of the big debates. Furthermore, in Melachim, in Hilchas Melachim, Perek Zayin, Halacha Dalet, the Rambam says this: Vamed Rambam Murim, Shemachzirin Anoshim. When do we say that, famously, some soldiers go back, and that's the psukim in the Torah, that there are paturim for certain categories of people, someone who newly married, or he built a new house, he built a new vineyard. That is only in a Melchemes Rishus. Melchemes Mitzvah Hakol Yotzin, everyone has got to go out. Everyone has to go out. So these are some of the sources that are marshaled to argue that there is an obligation on everyone to go out and serve in the army. They could argue perhaps it's a Melchemes Mitzvah. They could argue from the precedents of Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, and many more sources. Well, what are the counter arguments? So that the Yeshiva Bochrim should be exempt from army service. So take a look, just a few points. And again, most of these points I've come across there. There are some sources at the top of under the title. The Rambam says in Hilchos Shmitza v'Yovel, famous Rambam, Perek Yud Gimel, why is it that Levi, one of the sons of Yaakov Avinu, does not get a nachala, an inheritance in Eretz Yisrael? Because Levi, Shevet Levi, have been set aside to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to educate, to show the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, u'mishpatov, and his laws, to teach Torah. Therefore, says the Rambam, therefore they've got a specific designated job, and therefore they don't go out to Milchama. As it were, they are the army of Hashem. And then in the next halacha in Yud Gimel, this is Shmitz of Yovel, Yud Gimel, it says, V'lo Shevet Levi Bovad. Not only is it Shevet Levi, any other person that his spirit inspires him, who wants to set aside and designate his life to know and to acquire knowledge about Hashem, and he sort of focuses on a life of learning and teaching Torah. So it's not just Shevet Levi who have a designated role and therefore are exempt from warfare, but anybody who has designated, who has chosen that course of life and is not engaging in regular sort of mundane physical activity also has that role. Another important source is a Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara in Sanhedrin Mem Tes Amdala says, David le'osu Yoav milchama, ve'mole Yoav le'osu David b'Torah. A very important source. That were it not for David's Hamelech, then Yoav would not succeed in war, and were it not for Yoav, David wouldn't be able to learn Torah. The Gemara says, quotes a pasuk. Pasuk says from Shmuel Beis, "Vahi David also mishpat utzaka lechol amoy v'Yoav ben Tzruya ala tzava." The David Hamelech did mishpat and tzedakah to all his people, and Yoav ben Tzruya, the general of the army, was involved in warfare. Now, says the Gemara, Matam David also mishpat utzaka lechol amoy. How was it that David Hamelech was able to do mishpat utzaka to all his people? Mishum de Yoav ala tzava, because Yoav was overseeing the army, and he facilitated David HaMelech's doing mishpat and tzedakah, which we'll see what that means in a minute. Matam Yoav ala tzava, and why is it that Yoav was able to engage in battle? Mishum de David also mishpat tzedakah l'chalamai, because of the zechus of David HaMelech. Says Rashi there, Ilmole David shaya isik b'Torah, because David HaMelech was engaged in Torah study, lo asa Yoav milchama. Therefore, Yoav didn't even need to do milchama. It was the zechus of David HaMelech that stood by Yoav in that he didn't need to do milchama. Moreover, the Maharsha takes the flip side, and the Maharsha explains, Yoav lo haya David ponu la'asuk b'Torah, were it not for Yoav, who was overseeing the physical material, the physical defense of the Jewish people, David was therefore able to learn Torah. Were it not for the fact that Yoav gave this security, he was sort of the arm of Hishtadlus dealing with that facilitated David HaMelech being able to focus on what he did, i.e. the mishpat and the tzedakah for the Jewish people. Another source, Gemara in Makkah Daf Yud Amud Aleph, Amar Rishub ben Levi, Mai dechsiv omdes hay ragleinu b'sharech Yerushalayim, migorim l'ragleinu sheyamdu b'milchama. What causes us, our legs, to stand in milchama? Sharish Yerushalayim shayu oiskim b'Torah. It's the involvement, the occupation, the preoccupation of limud haTorah, which enables the Shari Yerushalayim to stand. The Medrash Eicha says, this is in the penultimate box, Hakol kol Yaakov hayadayim de Esov, kol zman shekol shel Yaakov b'botzei knesias b'bot midrashos. So long as the noise of Yaakov, the voice of Yaakov, i.e. Torah learning, is heard in the botzei knesias and bot midrashos, ein hayadayim de Esov, the hands of Esov will not rise. Then the hands of Esov will be able to emerge if you haven't got that kol. And lastly, the Rambam says an important point, which again is another discussion about Yeshiva Bochrim being exempt from army service, and that is the impact it could have on them spiritually. The Rambam famously says in Hilchos Deis in the beginning of the 6th parak, Derech briyasa shel adam lias nimshach b'dei Esov. We are very influenced by our surroundings, of a maisov, and by those who are around us. That's just the way of the world. The French Jews behave in a certain style, American Jews in a certain style, Eastern European Jews in a certain style, British Jews in a certain style. We're very much mushpa, influenced by our surroundings, for better or for worse. Therefore, says the Rambam, it's imperative that a person attaches himself to tzaddikim, to have great role models around, to attach himself to tzaddikim and chachomim who can influence him and role model outstanding behavior. And distance himself from Rishonim, and therefore if a person is in a place where the minhagim are evil, he should go to a place where that will have outstanding behavior to emulate. Now, of course, this needs an application for a situation today, and it's not straightforward. Of course, nowadays there are possibilities such as Nachal Haredi and Hesed Yeshivas and other types of programs where Shemir HaMitzvahs is obviously on the agenda. Of course, there are. This is debated, and in the formative years, aside from the importance of Limud HaTorah, the possibility of being influenced and impacted in very formative years of a person's life is also a factor which is put out there. But these are just a very brief look at some of the issues. Again, this week's halacha, which is connected to the parsha. I know this is a massive topic and there are many more things to be said, but anyway, at least that's a springboard for further thought and discussion and exploration.